The biting winter wind sliced through Olivia Blackburn's threadbare shawl as she hurried down the muddy main street of Silver Creek. Clutching a basket of eggs, she hoped to sell at the general store her last desperate attempt to make enough money for next week's rent before Mr. Patterson evicted her from the tiny shack behind his property. Silver Creek, Colorado, 1878, was an unforgiving place for a woman alone, especially one who had lost everything when her father died 6 months prior, leaving her with nothing but debts and distant memories of better days. At 22, Olivia had managed to survive by taking in washing, mending clothes, and selling eggs from the 3 chickens she had managed to keep after selling almost everything else. "Morning, Miss Blackburn," called Mr. Thompson from the hardware store doorway, his greeting friendly enough but his eyes filled with pity. Olivia nodded politely, keeping her gaze down. She had grown accustomed to the pitying looks, but they still stung her pride. Her father had been respected, once a mining engineer whose investments had gone sour just before the fever took him. The general store was busy that morning. Mrs. Finley, the banker's wife, stood at the counter with her 2 daughters, all 3 dressed in fine wool coats with fur trimming. Their laughter died as Olivia entered, the bell above the door announcing her arrival like an unwelcome interruption. "Good morning, Mr. Davis," Olivia said to the shopkeeper, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "I've brought some eggs to sell today." Before Mr. Davis could respond, Eliza Finley's voice cut through the air. "Mama, look, it's the pauper girl wearing the same torn dress she had on at church last Sunday, and the Sunday before that." Olivia's cheeks burned as she kept her eyes fixed on the counter. "Eliza," Mrs. Finley admonished, though her tone lacked conviction, "mind your manners." She turned to her other daughter and whispered something that made both girls titter behind gloved hands. Mr. Davis cleared his throat uncomfortably. "I'll take a look at those eggs, Miss Blackburn." Olivia carefully placed her basket on the counter, hoping none had cracked during her walk into town. The eggs were large and clean. She had taken great care with them. "Only a dozen this week?" Mr. Davis asked, frowning slightly. "Yes, sir. The cold has affected the hens." In truth, Olivia had eaten nothing but a crust of bread yesterday, saving the extra eggs to sell. "I'm afraid I can only give you 30 cents for these," he said apologetically. "Prices have dropped since the new shipments from Denver. 30 cents. Not even half what she needed for rent." Olivia bit her lip to keep it from trembling. "That will be fine, Mr. Davis." Mrs. Finley made a small noise of disdain. "Really, Mr. Davis, I don't see why you bother with such meager offerings. Those eggs are probably half frozen and the yolks runny." "Actually, madam," came a deep voice from behind Olivia, "ranch-raised eggs from healthy hens are worth their weight in gold compared to those shipped in eggs that taste like cardboard." Olivia turned to see a tall man standing just inside the doorway. His broad shoulders filled out a worn leather coat, and a dusty Stetson sat atop dark blonde hair that curled slightly at his collar. His face was tanned from the sun, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble, and his green eyes held a glint of challenge as he looked at Mrs. Finley. "Mr. O'Malley," Mrs. Finley said, her tone instantly sweetening. "What a surprise to see you in town. We had heard you were up at the North Range." "Got business in town, madam," he replied, tipping his hat politely before turning to Mr. Davis. "I'll take those eggs at 50 cents, if the lady's willing to sell them to me instead." Olivia's eyes widened in surprise. She'd never seen this man before, and 50 cents for a dozen eggs was far more than the going rate. "That's very generous, Mr. O'Malley," Mr. Davis said, looking equally surprised. "Not generous at all," the stranger replied, his eyes meeting Olivia's for the first time. "Just fair payment for quality goods." A small, unexpected warmth bloomed in Olivia's chest at his words. No one had spoken about anything she owned as quality in a long time. "Well," Mrs. Finley huffed, gathering her daughters close. "We must be going. Come along, girls." She swept past Olivia, deliberately bumping her shoulder hard enough to make Olivia stumble backward. The basket of eggs teetered on the counter edge. Olivia lunged forward with a gasp, but the stranger was faster. His hand shot out, steadying the basket before a single egg could fall. "Careful there," he said softly, his hand lingering near hers on the basket's handle. "Thank you," Olivia whispered, acutely aware of how close he stood, of the clean scent of soap and leather that surrounded him. "Garrett O'Malley," he said, extending his hand. "I own the Double Diamond Ranch about 10 miles west of town." "Olivia Blackburn," she replied, hesitantly placing her small hand in his much larger one. His grip was firm but gentle, his palm calloused from work. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Blackburn." He released her hand and reached into his pocket, pulling out a $50 coin that he placed on the counter. "I meant what I said about those eggs." "It's too much," Olivia protested weakly, though the money would help her immensely. "It's what they're worth," he insisted. "And I'd like to place an order for more if you're able. We've got a cookhouse full of hungry ranch hands, and our chickens aren't laying well in this cold snap." Before Olivia could respond, the door burst open again, letting in a blast of cold air and 3 boisterous cowboys. They called out greetings to Garrett, their eyes curious as they took in Olivia's shabby appearance. "Boss, wagons loaded with supplies," said the oldest of the 3, a weathered man with a salt and pepper beard. "We should head back before that storm hits." "Be right there, Frank," Garrett answered before turning back to Olivia. "How about I stop by next week for more eggs? Where can I find you?" Embarrassment flooded Olivia at the thought of him seeing the tiny shack where she lived. I can bring them to town," she offered. "Nonsense. That's a long walk in this weather." Garrett studied her face, seeming to read her discomfort. "Tell you what, I pass by the East Road on my way to town. I could stop there if that's convenient." Relief washed over her. "Yes, that would be fine. The small cabin behind the Patterson property." One of the younger cowboys snickered. "That falling down shack, ain't that where old man Blackburn's girl ended up after he drank away their money?" Olivia flinched as if she'd been struck. Her father hadn't been a drunk, he'd been a broken man who'd made poor investments, but rumors spread quickly in small towns, growing more vicious with each telling. "That's enough, Tom," Garrett said sharply, his expression hardening as he turned to the young cowboy. "Miss Blackburn is a lady and will be treated with respect." The cowboy's face reddened. "Sorry, boss. Didn't mean nothing by it." Olivia stared at the floor, mortification burning through her. She needed to leave to escape the stares and whispers that followed her everywhere in this town. "I should go," she murmured, wrapping her thin shawl more tightly around her shoulders, though it did little against the cold. Outside, the temperature had dropped further and snowflakes had begun to fall. Olivia shivered as she stepped onto the boardwalk, the $50 clutched in her palm, enough for some flour and maybe a small piece of salt pork, but still not enough for rent. "Miss Blackburn," Garrett called, following her outside. "Wait a moment." She stopped, turning reluctantly to face him. "You're freezing," he said, his brow furrowing with concern as he took in her trembling form and the inadequate shawl. Before she could protest, he shrugged out of his heavy leather coat and draped it over her shoulders. The warmth of it enveloped her immediately, along with his scent. "I can't take your coat," she objected, though her frozen fingers had already clutched the edges, drawing it closer. "Sure you can." His smile was gentle, warming her in ways the coat couldn't. "It looks better on you anyway." Olivia felt the eyes of passers-by on them, the wealthy rancher and the pauper girl, and tried to hand the coat back. "People will talk," she whispered. "Let them," Garrett replied, his voice low but firm. "They've got nothing better to do in this town." Mrs. Finley and her daughters emerged from the milliner's shop across the street, their eyes widening at the sight. Eliza whispered something to her sister, both of them breaking into giggles. "Look at that, the pauper's trying to catch herself a rich husband," Eliza said, her voice deliberately loud enough to carry. Olivia tried to shrink into herself, humiliation washing over her in waves. "You know what I see, Miss Blackburn," Garrett said, loud enough for the Finleys to hear. "I see a woman rich in dignity and grace, qualities that can't be bought with any amount of money." Mrs. Finley's mouth dropped open in shock, and Olivia felt a sudden rush of gratitude toward this stranger, who had shown her more kindness in a few minutes than she had received in months. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes meeting his. "I'll come by for those eggs next week," he said, his voice returning to normal volume. "And I'll expect my coat back then, washed and mended, if you're willing. I'd pay well for the service." Olivia recognized what he was doing, offering her work without making it seem like charity. Pride warred with necessity, but the practical side won out. "I'd be happy to mend it for you, Mr. O'Malley." "Garrett," he corrected with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "See you next week, Olivia." As he walked back to his men and their loaded wagon, Olivia couldn't help but watch him go, the heavy coat still warm around her shoulders and something equally warm blooming in her chest, something dangerously close to hope. True to his word, Garrett appeared at Olivia's door the following week. She had spent days washing and carefully mending his coat, even oiling the leather with precious rendered fat she had been saving. She had also spent those days trying not to think about him, about his kind eyes, and the way he had stood up for her in front of the entire town. "Miss Blackburn," he called out, approaching her small cabin on horseback, a magnificent chestnut stallion snorting clouds of steam in the cold air. Olivia emerged from the cabin, her heart inexplicably racing. She had dressed in her best and only other dress, a faded blue calico that had once belonged to her mother. "Mr. O'Malley," she greeted, clutching his folded coat in her arms, "I've prepared your coat as promised." He dismounted with fluid grace, tying his horse to the hitching post before approaching her. "And how much do I owe you for the work?" 25 cents would be fair," she replied, knowing it was less than what others might charge but unwilling to take advantage of his generosity. Garrett reached into his pocket and pulled out not just a quarter, but several silver dollars. "I've also come about those eggs we discussed, and I was hoping you might be willing to take on some regular mending for the ranch. We've got a bunkhouse full of men who can't sew worth a damn, and clothes tear something fierce in this work." Olivia stared at the money, then back at his face, searching for pity, but finding only straightforward business. "That's very kind, but it's not kindness, it's necessity," he interrupted gently. "Our last mending woman moved to Denver, and Mrs. Holloway, our cook, is threatening to quit if she has to add sewing to her duties." A smile tugged at Olivia's lips despite herself. "Well, we can't have that." "No, we certainly cannot. Her biscuits are the only thing keeping half my men from running off to California." His green eyes twinkled with humor. "So do we have a deal? A dozen eggs weekly and whatever mending we can bring you." This was work, honest work that would allow her to keep her meager home and perhaps even begin to rebuild. "Yes, Mr. O'Malley, we have a deal. Garrett," he reminded her, taking his coat and shrugging it on. "And I'd like to add one more thing to our arrangement, if I may." Olivia raised her eyebrows questioningly. "I pass this way often. Would it be too forward of me to stop by occasionally, just to check that you have everything you need, The proper thing would be to refuse such an offer from an unmarried man. But Olivia had learned that propriety did little to keep one warm or fed, and there was something about Garrett O'Malley that made her want to trust him. "That would be acceptable," she said finally, "as long as we maintain all proper appearances." His smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "Of course, Miss Blackburn. I am nothing if not a gentleman." As the weeks passed, Garrett's visits became a regular part of Olivia's life. True to his word, he brought mending work from the ranch, shirts with torn sleeves, pants with blown-out knees, even some fancy embroidery work for tablecloths in the main house. The pay was generous, and for the first time since her father's death, Olivia found herself with a bit extra after paying the rent. But it was Garrett himself, rather than the work he brought, that became the brightest spot in her days. He never arrived empty-handed, sometimes bringing a cut of fresh beef or venison, other times a book from his library that he thought she might enjoy. They would talk while she worked, Garrett sitting comfortably at her small table, telling stories of ranch life or asking about her past. It was during one such visit in late February that Olivia found herself sharing more than she had intended. "My father wasn't what they say," she said quietly, her needle flashing in and out of the shirt she was mending. "He wasn't a drunk. He was a mining engineer who believed in people too easily. He invested everything we had in a silver mine that turned out to be salted." Garrett's expression grew serious. "The Blackburn, that was your father's mine." Olivia nodded, keeping her eyes on her work. "Everything we had went into it." When the truth came out, it broke him. He died of pneumonia 6 months later, but I think it was really shame that killed him. "I remember hearing about that swindle," Garrett said. "A lot of good men lost money in that scheme. My father lost more than money. He lost his reputation." Olivia finally looked up, meeting Garrett's gaze. "That's why people in town treat me the way they do. They think he was either a fool or part of the swindle. And what do you think? I think he was a good man who wanted to build something lasting for his family." Tears pricked at her eyes, but she blinked them away. "He didn't deserve what happened to him." Garrett reached across the table, his large hand covering hers, stilling her nervous stitching. "Neither do you." The touch of his hand on hers sent warmth spreading up her arm. They sat like that for a long moment, connected by more than just the physical contact. "Olivia," he said finally, his voice low and serious, "there's a spring dance in town next weekend. Would you do me the honor of accompanying me?" Her heart leapt at the invitation, but doubt quickly followed. "People would talk." "They'll talk anyway," he said with a wry smile. "Might as well give them something worth talking about." "Why me?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "You could escort any woman in the county." Garrett's expression softened. "Because when I'm with you, I don't feel like the owner of the Double Diamond or the son of Patrick O'Malley. I just feel like myself, and I like who I am when I'm with you." The simple honesty of his words melted something inside her that had been frozen for too long. "Yes," she whispered. "I would like to go to the dance with you." His smile was brilliant. "I'll pick you up at 6. And Olivia, wear something you won't mind being seen in all over town, because I intend to dance every dance with you." After he left, Olivia sank onto her bed, her heart racing with both excitement and dread. She had nothing suitable to wear to a dance, especially not on the arm of one of the wealthiest ranchers in the county. She had been saving every extra penny, but it wasn't nearly enough for a new dress. For the next few days, Olivia worked tirelessly, taking in extra mending from town and selling every egg her hens produced. By Friday, she had enough for fabric but not enough time to make a new dress. It was Mrs. Patterson, her landlord's wife, who came to her rescue. "I heard you're going to the dance with Garrett O'Malley," she said. appearing at Olivia's door with a large package wrapped in brown paper. "My daughter left this behind when she married and moved to Kansas City. It might need taking in, but the color would suit you." Inside the package was a dress of deep forest green, the bodice trimmed with black velvet ribbon. It was slightly dated in style but made of fine wool that had held up well. "I couldn't possibly," Olivia began. "You can and you will," Mrs. Patterson interrupted firmly. "That boy's had every unmarried woman in 3 counties setting their cap for him since he took over the ranch 2 years ago. If he's chosen you, you deserve to look your best." Tears stung Olivia's eyes at the unexpected kindness. "Thank you," she whispered. Mrs. Patterson's weathered face softened. "Your father was a good man who got cheated by bad ones. Don't let anyone make you feel less because of it." With Mrs. Patterson's help, Olivia spent the night altering the dress to fit her slender frame. She washed her hair and pinned it up in a style she remembered her mother wearing, letting a few curls frame her face. When Garrett arrived the next evening, driving a polished buggy pulled by 2 matching bay horses, Olivia barely recognized him. Gone was his usual ranch attire, replaced by a well-tailored black suit, crisp white shirt, and string tie. His hair was neatly combed, and he'd trimmed his stubble to a clean line along his jaw. His eyes widened as she stepped out of the cabin, and he removed his hat, holding it over his heart. "Olivia," he breathed, "you look beautiful." She blushed, smoothing her hands over the green wool skirt. "Thank you, so do you, handsome, I mean," he laughed, a rich sound that made her smile in return. "I clean up tolerably well when required." He offered his arm. "Shall we?" The town hall was decorated with paper streamers and lanterns, a small band playing lively tunes in the corner. As Garrett escorted Olivia inside, conversations faltered and heads turned. She could feel the weight of stares on her back, hear the whispers behind raised hands. "Everyone's looking," she murmured nervously. "Of course they are," Garrett replied, his hand warm and steady on the small of her back. "You're the most beautiful woman in the room." Before she could respond, Mrs. Finley appeared before them, her daughters hovering at her sides. "Mr. O'Malley," she simpered, "how lovely to see you at our little gathering." "You remember my daughters, Eliza and Mary, madam?" Garrett nodded politely, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Ladies, you've met Miss Blackburn, of course." Mrs. Finley's smile tightened. "Yes, naturally." "What an interesting choice of escort, Mr. O'Malley." "Not interesting at all," Garrett replied smoothly. "Simply the only choice worth making." He turned to Olivia. "I believe they're starting a waltz. May I have this dance?" As he led her to the dance floor, Olivia caught sight of Mrs. Finley's outraged expression and couldn't suppress a small, vindictive thrill of satisfaction. "You enjoyed that," Garrett murmured, his eyes twinkling as he took her in his arms for the dance. "Perhaps a little," Olivia admitted, then gasped slightly as he pulled her closer than was strictly proper. "Good," he said. "So did I." The evening passed in a blur of music and laughter. True to his word, Garrett danced every dance with Olivia, ignoring the increasingly obvious attempts by other young women to catch his attention. They took a break only for refreshments, Garrett fetching them both cups of punch while Olivia tried to catch her breath. "Mind if I join you?" asked a female voice. Olivia looked up to see Sarah Jenkins, the schoolteacher, smiling at her. They had known each other slightly before Olivia's father died, but like most of the town, Sarah had kept her distance afterward. "Please," Olivia gestured to the empty chair. "You and Mr. O'Malley make a handsome couple," Sarah said, her tone genuine. "I've never seen him smile so much." "Thank you," Olivia replied, unsure what else to say. "I wanted to apologize," Sarah continued, lowering her voice, "for not being friendlier after your father passed. People were saying such terrible things, and I let it influence me instead of forming my own opinion." The unexpected apology brought a lump to Olivia's throat. "That's very kind of you to say. It's the truth." "And seeing you tonight," Sarah broke off as Garrett returned, nodding politely to the schoolteacher before handing Olivia her punch. "Miss Jenkins," he greeted. "Are you enjoying the dance?" "Very much," Sarah replied, standing. "And I was just telling Miss Blackburn how glad I am to see her here tonight. It's been too long since she's joined in town events." After Sarah left, Garrett sat beside Olivia, his expression curious. "What was that about?" "I think," Olivia said slowly, "that seeing me with you has changed how some people see me." "And how do you feel about that?" She considered the question seriously. "I'm not sure. Part of me resents that it takes a man, especially a wealthy one, to make people treat me with respect. But another part of me is just grateful to be treated like a human being again." Garrett took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "You deserve their respect regardless of who you're with, but I won't pretend I'm not happy to be the man by your side." The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Garrett, come with me," he said suddenly, standing and tugging her gently to her feet. "I want to show you something." He led her outside and around to the back of the town hall, where a small garden lay dormant under the winter sky. The air was crisp but not bitterly cold, and a full moon cast everything in silver light. "What did you want to show me?" Olivia asked, her breath making small clouds in the night air. Garrett turned to face her, still holding her hand. "This," he said simply, and leaned down to press his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning a man asking permission rather than taking. Olivia stood frozen for a heartbeat before her body responded of its own accord, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest as she kissed him back. When they broke apart, Garrett's eyes searched her face. "I've wanted to do that since the day I met you," he confessed. "In the general store?" Olivia asked, a little breathless. "When I was selling eggs," he nodded, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You looked so proud, even with those Finley women trying to tear you down. I admired your spirit then, and I've come to admire everything else about you since." "Garrett," she said, suddenly serious, "people will say you're courting me out of pity." "Let them," he replied, equally serious. "We'll know the truth." "And what is the truth?" His hand came up to cup her cheek. "That I'm falling in love with you, Olivia Blackburn, and if you'll let me, I'd like to court you properly, with the intention of making you my wife someday." Joy bloomed in her chest, so intense it was almost painful. "People will say I'm after your money." "People say a lot of foolish things," he countered. "The question is, what do you say?" In answer, Olivia rose up on her tiptoes and kissed him again, her arms sliding around his neck. His arms encircled her waist, lifting her slightly off the ground as he deepened the kiss. When they finally parted, both a little dazed, Olivia laughed softly. "I say yes. Yes to your courtship and yes to whatever may come after." Spring came early to Silver Creek that year, bringing with it new beginnings. Olivia's tiny flock of chickens had grown to a dozen, thanks to a gift of hens from Garrett. The eggs provided a steady income, supplemented by her mending business, which had expanded beyond the Double Diamond Ranch to include several families in town. Most evenings found Garrett at her cabin, sometimes bringing dinner from Mrs. Holloway's kitchen, other times simply sitting with Olivia on the small porch he had built for her, talking about their days or reading aloud from one of his books. Their courtship had caused a predictable stir in town, but as the weeks passed, the gossip had settled into a kind of grudging acceptance. It helped that Garrett was unfailingly polite but unmovable in his attention to Olivia, making it clear to everyone that his intentions were serious. On a particularly beautiful evening in May, Garrett arrived at Olivia's cabin carrying a picnic basket and wearing a nervous expression that immediately put her on alert. "Is everything all right?" she asked as he helped her into the buggy. "Everything's fine," he assured her, though he seemed unusually focused on handling the horses. "I thought we might have dinner at the lake today. It's a perfect evening for it." The small lake on the edge of the Double Diamond property was one of their favorite spots. As Garrett spread a blanket on the grassy bank, Olivia unpacked the basket, finding fried chicken, biscuits, and a jar of preserves. "Mrs. Holloway outdid herself," she commented, arranging the food on plates. "She knows it's a special occasion," Garrett replied, then looked as if he'd said more than he intended. Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Is it? Have I forgotten something?" "No," he said quickly. "It's just, well, I had something particular in mind for tonight." They ate in companionable silence, though Olivia noticed that Garrett seemed distracted, glancing at her when he thought she wasn't looking. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, he finally seemed to come to a decision. "Olivia," he began, taking her hand in his. "These past few months have been the happiest of my life." "Mine too," she replied softly, her heart beginning to race. "When I first saw you in that store, standing so proud despite everything, I knew you were special. I didn't know then that you would become everything to me." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I love you, Olivia Blackburn. Would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a single perfect diamond. Olivia gasped, tears filling her eyes as she looked from the ring to Garrett's hopeful face. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Garrett, I will marry you." His face broke into a radiant smile as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, catching the last rays of sunlight and sending prisms of color dancing across their joined hands. "It was my mother's," he explained, his voice thick with emotion. "My father gave it to me before he died, said I should save it for a woman as strong and kind as she was. He would have loved you, Olivia." "And I would have loved him," she replied, tears spilling over as Garrett gathered her into his arms, sealing their engagement with a kiss that promised a lifetime of love. They were married in the small church in Silver Creek on a bright June day. The building filled to capacity with ranch hands from the Double Diamond, and, to Olivia's surprise, many townspeople who had once shunned her. Sarah Jenkins had become a true friend in the months of their engagement, helping Olivia with preparations and standing as her maid of honor. Even Mrs. Finley attended, though she sat stiffly in the back pew, her daughters noticeably absent. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. Olivia wearing a cream-colored dress that Garrett had insisted on ordering from Denver. As they exchanged vows, Olivia could hardly believe how much her life had changed in the span of a year from near destitution to becoming the wife of the man she loved with her whole heart. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "Mr. O'Malley, you may kiss your bride." As Garrett's lips met hers, sealing their union, applause erupted throughout the church. When they turned to face their guests, Olivia's heart swelled at the genuine joy on so many faces. The reception was held on the grounds of the Double Diamond, tables set up under tall cottonwood trees, lanterns hanging from the branches to provide light as evening fell. There was music and dancing, abundant food, and flowing champagne that Garrett had brought in specially for the occasion. As twilight deepened, Garrett led Olivia away from the celebration, down a path she hadn't noticed before. It led to a small rise where a newly built cabin stood, lights glowing warmly in the windows. "What's this?" she asked, puzzled. "Our home," Garrett replied, his arm around her waist. "At least for now. I know you might not be ready to move into the main house with all its memories of my parents. I thought we could start fresh, build our own memories." Olivia stared at the cabin, larger and sturdier than her old one, but still cozy and inviting, and felt tears welling up again. "You built this for me, for us," he corrected gently. "Though I did make sure it has a room just for your sewing. Your business is doing so well, I thought you might want to continue it." The thoughtfulness of the gesture overwhelmed her. This was a man who didn't just love her, but understood her need for independence, for making her own way despite her changed circumstances. "I love you," she whispered, turning in his arms to face him. "So much." "And I love you, Mrs. O'Malley," he murmured, bending to kiss her, his lips warm and insistent against hers. Later that night, as they lay tangled together in the new bed in their new home, Olivia traced the line of Garrett's jaw with her fingertip. "I never thought I could be this happy," she confessed. "After my father died, I thought I'd lost everything." Garrett caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "You never lost the things that matter most: your dignity, your strength, your capacity for love." "You saw that in me from the beginning," she marveled, "when everyone else saw only poverty." "I saw a woman rich in all the ways that count," he replied, drawing her closer. "And now you've made me the richest man in Colorado by becoming my wife." As she drifted to sleep in her husband's arms, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from a threadbare shawl and a basket of eggs to a love that filled her heart to overflowing. She had lost much, but gained infinitely more. And in the end, Garrett had been right all along. She had always been rich in the things that truly mattered.